Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we continue our realistic objects, and what are we drawing? Spoon. It's all about creating the shadows and highlights. All the reflections need to be included. I'm going to give you all the tips in a second. If you want to know the materials I use, they're in the description part. My real-time tutorials are available for you on my Patreon. And if you want to see the library of my Patreon, you can go to my website, ecegurler.com/Patreon. We'll do it again. Let's draw. Let's talk about our photo first, how we should draw our sketch and how we should be shading. So when you look at the spoon, you see some highlights first. They are completely white. So these areas needs to be first spotted by us, and then we can go in and leave these places alone when we're drawing. So this is an important step. After we decided this, then we can look other parts, such as the darkest areas where we will apply much more shading. Then there are complicated areas such as this. Let's look at closely. Here you see that there are so many variations of thin and thick, very dark shadows and highlights. So in order to give these, we need a special type of pencil. It can be a mechanical pencil, for example, because they have a very, very thin lead that you can actually give those details, or you can sharpen your pencil to a very, very fine point in order to work on these areas. These are going to be a little bit challenging, but we will do it. Don't worry about it right now. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, the shadow of the spoon in 3D. In order to give this 3D effect, we need to do this shadow, and definitely we will need to blend in order to give this smooth result. If you look at the top part right underneath the spoon, you will see that there is a little bit of darker area, and we need to keep this in mind when we are shading as well. So we did our investigation on our photo. Now we are ready to draw. Well, the first one is we need to sketch very well, of course. All these points that I just mentioned, all the highlights, all the shadows, and those teeny bitty tiny lines, we need to all put them in our sketch. Otherwise, it will be really, really hard for us to remember where to put those details on. As a first step, we will put in the shadows, the darkest parts. There will be multiple layers, so this is just the first layer, but putting these shadows first will help us, especially to determine where the highlights will stay. We need to blend in our realistic drawings. We already blend in our realistic portraits with human portraits and animal portraits, and we do the same thing also for the objects. I got my Q-tip because these are very small areas. You can use your blending stump as well. Then I blend everything with my tissue. But don't forget that after you blend with tissue, you will need to erase the outside of the borders. The next step is to add highlights. In each layer, we need to add highlights as well. Here with my eraser pencil, I'm trying to find all these spots that needs highlight because I just did one layer yet. It just doesn't show very much, but as we go along, you will see how this works. More pressure on shadows. So here I see a darker shadow, as you can see in the photo as well. In order to do that with my sharpened pencil, I'm going over the darkest places one more time. And of course, we will blend again because yes, borders are very sharp, but inside those borders, the tone changes are not that sharp. So in order to give those value changes realistically, we need to blend. Highlights again. So we go over the highlights one more time, this time adding more details. You can also lighten up the previous parts that you felt like it was a little bit darker than you thought. This is exactly what I'm doing right now. When you use your eraser, there will be eraser bits everywhere. Don't forget to brush them off because that might kind of intervene with your drawing. Now, tiny boundaries. For these tiny boundaries, I used my B pencil, and it was really sharp, guys. If you don't have a sharpened pencil, it's hard to give these details. And let's come to the most difficult part. This rounded part will be the most difficult one. As you can see, there will be many changes from darker to lighter and the highlights. I am putting in first with my 4B the darkest parts. It's a reflection of a guy, actually. This is what spoon or silver does, right? Reflect what is around them. So this is what exactly we are doing. We are drawing what the reflection tells us. I'm doing the darkest parts again with my sharpened 4B pencil, and these are really dark around here, and I'm trying to keep my hand steady so that I can give a straight line. If you want a straight one, you can always use some templates or another object to draw with instead of using freehand. Here you see that I put in all these lines that I see in the photo. Now we need to blend, and since this is a small area, we need our Q-tip again or blending stump to blend this part. I blended every line that I saw with the clean part of my Q-tip. As you can see, I also went down. I'm going to make sure that everything blends in to each other very well, so I'm using my tissue here. The tissue, of course, lightens up all the darkest parts. This is why we're gonna go again and do another layer. Here you see me again erasing all the outside parts because we want them to remain white. Now the only thing remains is basically repeating the layers. In our layers, do you remember my depth method? We are drawing, erasing, and blending. So we constantly do these layers until we are satisfied with what we get. But how can we get those tiny little highlighted lines? I'm going to show you in a bit. Well, in human portraits, we don't contour. It's a bad idea to frame your drawings, your face, your eyes, or your nose. But this is an object. This is not a living thing. So for still objects, we have to contour because they have sharp lines. And this is why we shouldn't be really afraid to use our pencil and drawing dark frames. If you are used to drawing human portraits, probably this will be a little bit hard transition for you, but this is how the 3D objects work. Now, those tiny little bit white lines I was talking about, I tried my white charcoal there and it worked. So I highly recommend using either a white colored pencil, white charcoal pencil, or whatever white color you have there to give those tiny details, because my eraser was not thin enough. Now we are fine-tuning. If you have a mechanical pencil here, that would be much better. But if you don't, just like me, I have a mechanical pencil, but I don't have the value that I want to use. So I'm using my H&B pencil instead. With my B shade, I'm just going over these lines very carefully. Not with a straight line, as you can see, with just small lines that are connected to each other so that I don't give any room to a mistake. Now I'm highlighting again with my eraser, as you can see, and then I'm erasing and I'm blending. Now we will do the shadow underneath the spoon so that it gives this 3D effect. It's actually standing on a surface. So what I did was with my B pencil, you can see the angle is pretty low, and I'm just doing this shading there, and I'm going to blend with my tissue very carefully, just going over the shaded areas so that it gives this beautiful smooth boundaries, just like in the photo. Now we will darken it up. You can use your 6B, 7B, 8B, whatever higher B pencils you have. I use my charcoal here because I think it is pretty dark there, and because I blended my graphite pencil underneath, it didn't give me any issues. After I used my medium charcoal here, I blended it with my Q-tip, and now for the lined areas, I'm using my tiny blending stump. This is really helpful if you want to blend something like a line, not necessarily an area. It started to look good, right? Now you can see that final lines are coming in. These lines kind of disappeared after we blended, but before we finish our drawing, we need to put these lines back. So with my sharpened pencil, my B pencil, I'm going over these lines one more time, very carefully, trying to be really loyal to the reference photo. So these lines are really hard to draw if you don't have a good sketch, guys. So I again highly recommend you to have a very detailed sketch from the very beginning. Here are some lines too, you can see coming down. A bit complicated right here, but there's definitely a definite line there. Here we go. And final highlights, of course, as I said, dab, drawing, erasing, and blending. So I am doing these parts that kind of disappeared while we were drawing and blending. Those highlights need to be there as well. In order to actually kind of get rid of those eraser bits, you can use your tissue very gently as well. Here I'm lighting it up and blending with my Q-tip. Here is a little bit darker and it needs to have smooth transitions around here. So with my 4B, I am actually kind of adding much more shadow here. Of course, we need to blend that with our blending stump and with just a little bit of our tissue, and now we are coming to an end. We are almost there. So final touch-ups are always important. I keep telling my students to do that, and actually in order to do that, I highly recommend you to leave your work for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe go have lunch and come back and look at your photo again and compare with your drawing. You will see the mistakes much more easily this way because your eyes get tuned very easily when you look at it for hours and hours long. Now you see that my eraser pencil is really helpful. In order to draw 3D realistic objects, you need your eraser pencil because this is the best way to give those tiny little details of highlights. There you go. I hope you liked this video and you found it helpful, guys. I will see you in my next video. As always, bye. Thanks for watching my video. If you like my videos, please don't forget to subscribe. And for my real-time narrated tutorials, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/Ece Gurler. Stay with art and love.